Hello students, and welcome back to the Lore of the Iron Kingdoms with me, Professor Caster. Today we are going to be discussing Khadors' quote-unquote light Warjacks, or some of their more ancient Warjacks. And I call them ancient because, well, they are. Most of them are so old that their Cortexes actually have a problem with failing and exploding. Well, at least they did before I imagine after they took over Lael, they actually figured out how to balance the old chemicals inside these ancient Warjacks to keep them from exploding. I guess in the new Mark 4 they removed their instability drives, but we are reading from Mark 3 histories of these Warjacks, so we will do that, and then of course I will go over their Mark 4 changes as well after we discuss their lore. Also a big shout out, thank you to Privateer Press for letting us read their fantastic lore. And as always, please like and comment, and if you would like to be so awesome, please subscribe, because that always helps the channel grow, and comments also help me drive our channel into directions that you guys would like to see, outside of me just reading Circle Oberos lore and, of course, Khador lore to the end. If you guys want to hear any other faction or any other character that you want me to go over, let me know, and we will make a video on it right away. Alrighty guys, well, let's begin the lore and history of the Berserker, the Mad Dog, and the Rager. Berserker, Khador Heavy Warjack. Initial service date, 430 AR. Height, 10 feet, 11 inches. Weight, 8.4 tons. Fuel load, 715 pounds. General use, 5 hours. Combat use, 55 minutes. These guys can fight for a bit. There is something uniquely terrifying about the Berserker, the oldest Khadorn Warjack still in service. It is also among the oldest relied upon by any modern nation. Some proudly view this fact as proof of both genius of Khadorn engineering and the timelessness of their weapons of war. Berserker Cortexes have become unstable in the years since their first manufacture well over a century ago. The Jacks are prone to charge without orders when near the frenzy of combat, and the bloodthirsty manner in which they slaughter the enemy infantry has long been legendary. Worse yet, their Cortex alloys and the alchemical mixtures in which their Cortexes bathe have become critically compromised by decay and are prone to massive concussive overload if stimulated with too much arcane energies. Those who know the merits of these brutal machines make excellent use of them. Armed with a pair of immense axes, a Berserker is a ruthless in close combat, and its volatile Cortex and propensity for violence become assets when facing the iron and steel counterparts of other nations. A Khadorn general with a Berserker views it as a rampaging force of destruction to be unleashed at the right moment and expended in the battle. I've seen these guys used by Vladimir a lot, partially because when you have a Berserker on the field or one of its counterparts, you don't really have to make too much modification because it knows what it wants to do, and it wants to kill. Mostly infantry, but you can have it kill pretty much whatever you want it to run up against. It's not the heaviest armored Warjack in the Khadorn infantry. It's not the lightest Warjack by any means, but its propensity to kill things is pretty unfathomably good. Also, I've seen this guy used a lot with Warjack marshals, who are able to give it commands, kind of give it commands with verbal and hand signals as well on the battlefield. And because this guy already has an issue being given too much arcane influence, it actually makes them last a lot longer when given to a Jack Marshal. Alrighty, the Mark 3 to Mark 4 changes for the Berserker. And like every other Warbeast and Warjack, not much has changed in the stats. Still a 4 speed. Their mat's actually gone up to 6, so that's actually a little bit better because the original Mark 3 was a 5. Although compared to the rest of the Khadorn Jacks, this guy hits a little bit less accurate anyway. And he's still a Berserker, which means after he kills something, he has to attack something in his melee range afterwards, whether that is a friendly or an enemy model. Regardless, that's just the normal Berserker setup. Although a fun thing about the new Berserker, or the classic type of Jacks, is they removed their unstable Cortex, which means if you feed in them focus, they don't have any chances to explode like in Mark 3, Mark 2, and I believe they were in Mark 1 if I remember correctly. So with this new update to them, I can see a lot more playability with them in Mark 4 just because they're relatively cheap jack compared to, their larger cousins, and having 2 power 16 axes. And Berserk, you can toss them into a lot of unit types and just clear them out, and then you don't have to worry about the focus explosions anymore. So that is phenomenal. Mad Dog, Khadors Heavy Warjack. Initial service date started 460 AR, height 10 foot 11 inches, weight 8.4 tons, fuel load 715 pounds, general use 5 hours, combat use 55 minutes. Given a pair of twin hammer spikes. Yeah, that's terrifying. A veritable battering ram of steel, the Mad Dog is the bane of the enemy infantry facing Khador in the field. Among the oldest Khadoran warjacks still in service, the Mad Dog was designed for a sole purpose of smashing its way through enemy formations. The Mad Dog's modified steam engine generates sufficient power to send machines through the ranks of the enemies without slowing. While its design has since been ellipsed, the Mad Dog can still make a deeply demoralizing impact as it crashes into groups of tightly packed infantry. Despite the wear and tear on these warjacks have endured over the many decades of warfare, some few have been maintained and are quite capable of fighting on modern battlefields. They barrel onward, heedless of resistance, to tread on broken bodies of enemies caught beneath their hulking frames. Once in the fray, the Mad Dog employs its spiked gauntlets with vicious enthusiasm, crushing anything within reach. The havoc it wreaks among the enemies is enough to break even the most disciplined battle lines. Few Mad Dogs remain wholly functional, but some commanders are quite partial to their use nevertheless. Over the course of their lengthy term of service, these heavy warjacks have become increasingly unstable, making psychotic rampages and explosive overloads all but inevitable. One of the fun things about the Mad Dog is it likes to trample people, and normally with a warjack you actually have to give it a command to make it trample people, but this guy just does it because he enjoys it. Doesn't need to be told to do it. He'll just run over a group of guys in a formation, laying bloody mayhem in his path, which is great for any kind of warjack, but even more useful in this one. And of course, if this guy isn't enough on its own, he also can be filled full of enough magic energies to make him explode right then on the battlefield and remove what's left of that poor unit. Alrighty, let's go over the Mark 3 to Mark 4 changes on the Mad Dog. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, their mat got a little bit better, so they're a mat 6 now instead of a mat 5. They still have 2 power 14 weapons that they like to slam into. In the original abilities that they had was Smasher and Unstable in Mark 3. However, in Mark 4, they removed the Unstable for these types of class jacks. They're still given Smasher, which allows them, they can make trample power attacks without spending any focus, and they gain an additional die to those trample attack rolls, so they're really good at trampling. However, they did add Fleet, so once per activation, you can spend 1 focus point to give this guy an additional +2 speed, so it would actually allow his tramples to move a little bit further, or, if you're recharging him in, he can move 2 inches further than normal. So, phenomenal, gets a lot more maneuverability on the battlefield. And again, these guys are relatively cheap, so I expect to see a lot more of these on the battlefield for Legacy armies in Mark 4. Rager, Khadoran Heavy Warjack. Kind of funny they have a Rager and a Berserker as if they're not one and the same. However, the armaments on this guy are different, so it makes him a different warjack. Initial service date 463 AR, height 10 feet 11 inches, weight 8.4 tons, fuel load 715 pounds, general use 5 hours, combat use 55 minutes. Armaments include a shield cannon and a gladius. While not as prone to unprovoked violent outbursts as other aging machines in the Khadoran arsenal, the Rager is inclined towards fierce overprotectiveness and will throw itself upon any perceived threat to its master without hesitation. It is for this reason that many Khadoran veteran warcasters still find a place for this aging warjack in their battle groups, though they keep the machine at arm's length given its increasing tendency towards destructive Cortex overloads. The Rager was designed with a heavy shield cannon of the sort used by the Man-O-War shock troopers. lending to the Jack that means for a strong defense without depriving it of a second weapon. Rather than hacking into the enemy with reckless abandon, the Rager employs a more measured fighting style, making effective use of its sword and shield. Most of the original Ragers have been destroyed, often having been reduced to scrap as they interpose their frames between the Warcaster and danger. While few remain in service today, they continue to demonstrate the same steadfast resolve and loyalty as when they first set foot on the field of battle. Weathering blows from enemy Warjacks and absorbing artillery fire directed at their controlling Warcasters, Ragers endure as an eloquent testament to the strength and resilience of the Khadoran engineering. These particular Warjacks make a phenomenal protector to either your Warcaster you have them connected to, or a Jack Marshal as well, if you need to have a Jack Marshal run around with somebody and keep them from getting shot up. And not only that, the shield actually gets these guys back up to a armor that's more similar to their larger kin, standard Khadoran Warjack. And a side note, with the new Mark IV setup, shield cannons have a gunfighter attachment, so technically these guys in melee get 3 different attacks. One being the gun, and then their shield, and then their gladius, making them even more dangerous without having to drive a bunch of focus into them. I think that's a win-win all around. Alrighty, let's go through some of the Mark III to Mark IV changes on the Rager for Khadoran. Again, as mentioned earlier, their mat goes up to a 6, better than their 5 in Mark III. They still have their shield cannon, still have their shield attack melee, still have their gladius melee as well. Of course, they did remove the unstables, so these guys are a lot more stable on the battlefield using a focus set caster. They still have their shield guard ability, which allows them to block any kind of ranged attacks against against anybody within 3 inches of them. And their point blank attack was actually removed, only because since all Warjacks and Warbeasts have dual attack now, and this guy just has his ability to shoot with this cannon in melee anyway, with the Mark IV. Well, they don't really need a point-blank shot. Alright students, well that will do us for the Khadors Light Jack section. I hope you guys enjoyed having all 3 of these guys listed all at once as you requested in our survey we did a little while back. And as always, please like, subscribe, comment, and let me know if you like this. Let me know if you have any suggestions for any other items you would like to go over in future videos. And a big shout out to Privateer Press for letting us read their lore and letting us see all the new changes that they're making to make Mark IV more accessible and streamlined for Mark III. If you have any questions, please list them down below. I would love to get to them. And as always, class dismissed.